Captain Jake Morrison floated near the large window of Aegis Prime, watching Earth turn slowly below him. The blue planet looked perfect from up here. White clouds drifted over green forests and clean oceans. Cities sparkled like jewels, their glass towers rising from gardens instead of concrete. It was hard to believe that just 70 years ago Earth had been dying. Jake had been born after the Great Peace began. His grandfather used to tell him stories about the old days, when countries fought each other and millions of people died in wars. Those stories seemed like fairy tales now. Jake could not imagine humans killing other humans. The very idea made him feel sick. He pushed himself away from the window and floated toward his command chair. Aegis Prime was one of 12 stations that watched over Earth from space. Each station had about 50 people living on it. Their job was simple: look for dangerous rocks flying toward Earth and blow them up before they could hurt anyone. It was the most boring job in the solar system. Jake had been doing this work for 15 years. In all that time, the biggest threat he had faced was a piece of space junk the size of a car. Most days he spent his time reading books, talking to his crew, and watching Earth spin beneath them. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Ben Torres from the sensor station, "I am getting some strange readings from the outer system." Jake pushed himself over to Ben's station. The young man looked confused as he stared at his screens. Jake knew that look. He had worn it himself many times when the sensors acted up. "What kind of strange?" Jake asked. "Something big is moving out near Neptune. But it is not moving like a rock or a comet. It is moving too fast and changing direction." Jake looked at the readings. Ben was right. Whatever was out there was definitely not natural. It was too far away to see clearly, but the computer said it was about the size of a small moon and moving toward the inner solar system. "Could it be one of the research ships?" Jake asked. Ben shook his head. "I checked. All our ships are accounted for. This thing came from outside the solar system." Jake felt something cold move through his stomach. In over a century of watching space, humans had never found any sign of alien life. Most scientists thought Earth was alone in the galaxy. But if this thing was not human and not natural, then it had to be something else. "Send a message to Earth Command," Jake said. "Tell them we have an unknown object entering the solar system." While Ben sent the message, Jake called the other 11 stations. Within minutes, all 12 captains were talking to each other through video screens. They all looked as confused and worried as Jake felt. "Has anyone else seen this thing?" asked Captain Mary Santos from Aegis 7. "We all have it on our sensors now," replied Captain Nick Hayes from Aegis 2. "It is definitely artificial. The shape is too regular to be natural." "What do we do?" asked Captain Joe Miller from Aegis 9. Jake did not know. Earth had no real military anymore. The 12 stations each had some old railguns for shooting rocks, but they were not built for fighting. Most of the people on the stations were scientists and engineers, not soldiers. "We wait for orders from Earth," Jake said, "and we keep watching." Down on Earth, Dr. Lisa Harper was working late in her laboratory on New Geneva Station. New Geneva was one of the floating cities that orbited Earth at the edge of space. It was built for research, with the best scientists from all over the planet working together. Lisa studied something that most people thought was impossible: the human mind's ability to connect with other minds. Over the past 50 years, something strange had been happening to people on Earth. During meditation or prayer, some people reported feeling connected to others far away. They could sense emotions and sometimes even share thoughts. Lisa's job was to figure out how this worked. She had spent 20 years building a network of sensors all over Earth and in space. These sensors could detect the tiny electrical fields that human brains produced. What she had found was amazing. When people meditated together, their brainwaves began to match each other. Even when they were thousands of miles apart, their minds seemed to sync up like musical instruments playing the same song. The more people who joined in, the stronger the effect became. Lisa believed that the long peace on Earth had somehow changed human brains. Without the stress of constant war and fear, people had developed new abilities. But these abilities only worked when people felt safe and connected to each other. She was reviewing her latest data when her computer beeped with an urgent message from Earth Command. As she read it, her face went pale. An unknown object was approaching Earth. It was clearly artificial and definitely not human. Lisa felt a cold fear grip her heart. If aliens existed and they were coming to Earth, what did they want? Were they friendly explorers like humans hoped to be someday? Or were they something else entirely? She looked out the window at Earth below. The planet looked so peaceful and beautiful. Billions of people lived down there in harmony with each other and with nature. They had no armies, no weapons of war, no experience with violence. What would happen if these aliens were not peaceful? Lisa activated her network's emergency protocols. All over Earth and in space, sensors began recording brainwave patterns from every human they could detect. If something terrible was about to happen, she wanted to document how humanity's consciousness responded to its first real threat in over a century. Far out in space, the alien probe continued its approach toward Earth. Inside the probe, artificial intelligence systems scanned the third planet and its moon. They detected the floating cities, the orbital stations, and the billions of life forms on the surface. The probe's computer analyzed everything it saw. It noted the lack of military installations, the absence of weapons platforms, and the peaceful nature of human broadcasts. According to its programming, this was a weak species that would offer little resistance. The probe sent its data back to the Vorth fleet waiting in the darkness beyond Pluto. When Admiral Krex Vorthak received the report, he smiled with satisfaction. Earth looked like it would be the easiest conquest in the collective's history. He had no idea what he was about to wake up. 3 days after the first probe was spotted, space around Earth filled with ships. They appeared suddenly as if they had been invisible before. Jake Morrison counted them from his station and felt his heart sink. There were hundreds of them, each one bigger than anything humans had ever built. The alien ships looked like massive spears made of dark metal. They moved in perfect formation, surrounding Earth like a cage. Their hulls glowed with strange purple lights, and Jake could see weapon ports along their sides. These were not exploration ships. They were built for war. "Captain," Ben Torres called out, his voice shaking. "We are receiving a transmission. It is coming from the largest ship." Jake nodded. "Put it on the main screen." The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge step backward. The alien was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like stone. Its eyes were black holes in its skull, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like metal scraping against metal. "I am Admiral Krex Vorthak of the Vorth Collective," the alien said. "Your species has 48 hours to surrender completely. Lay down any weapons you have. Prepare your planet for occupation. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your world and every living thing on it." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Jake looked around at his crew. They all looked terrified. Most of them had never even seen a real fight, much less a war. "Send that transmission to Earth Command immediately," Jake ordered, "and contact all other stations. We need to coordinate our response." Down on Earth, President Elena Martinez sat in the Emergency Command Center, deep beneath New York City. The room had not been used in over 50 years. Most people had forgotten it even existed. Now it buzzed with activity as officials tried to figure out what to do. "What do we have for defenses?" Elena asked General Robert Kane, the head of Earth's Planetary Protection Service. The old man looked embarrassed. 12 orbital stations with railguns designed for shooting asteroids, a few patrol ships for rescuing people in space, some old missile systems that have not been tested in decades. Against 300 alien warships, we might as well throw rocks at them. Elena felt sick. Earth had spent so long at peace that they had forgotten how to fight. They had no real weapons, no trained soldiers, no battle plans. Their technology was focused on healing, building, and exploring, not destroying. "How long do we have?" she asked. 48 hours until their deadline," Kane replied. "But they could attack at any moment if they choose to." On New Geneva Station, Dr. Lisa Harper watched her instruments with growing amazement. As news of the alien threat spread across Earth, something incredible was happening. Her consciousness network was activating on its own. All over the planet, people were gathering in groups to meditate and pray. In cities, parks, and homes, millions of humans were joining together in shared fear and hope. Lisa's sensors showed brainwave patterns unlike anything she had ever recorded. Instead of the gentle synchronization she usually observed, the patterns were intense and growing stronger. By the hour, it was as if 12 billion human minds were trying to connect with each other all at once. The electrical activity was so strong that it was affecting the planet's magnetic field. Dr. Harper called her assistant, Dr. Carl Stevens. "You need to see this data from the Lunar Observatory." Lisa looked at the readings from the moon and gasped. The electromagnetic field around Earth was changing. Patterns of energy were flowing around the planet like a giant brain's neural network. Earth itself seemed to be developing consciousness. "This should not be possible," Lisa whispered. At Luna Base, Colonel Alex Rivera monitored Earth's defenses and watched the alien fleet. The base was humanity's farthest outpost, a small research station on the dark side of the moon. Alex had 20 soldiers with him, trained for rescue operations and disaster relief, not combat. "Colonel," Sergeant Amy Chen reported, "the electromagnetic readings from Earth are off the charts. Something is happening down there." Alex nodded. He could feel it too, though he did not understand what it was. There was a pressure in his mind. Like a whisper he could almost hear. Sometimes he caught glimpses of thoughts that were not his own. Fear from the people on Earth, but also something else. Determination, anger, unity. Back on Aegis Prime, Jake Morrison felt the same strange sensations. As he prepared his station's defenses, he found himself moving with unusual confidence. His crew worked together perfectly, as if they could read each other's minds. When Ben looked at the sensor readings, Jake knew what he was seeing without being told. "Captain," Ben said, "the alien fleet is moving. They are taking positions for attack." Jake watched the alien ships spread out around Earth, but instead of feeling helpless, he felt calm. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he could sense the other 11 station captains. He knew exactly where they were and what they were planning. Without speaking to them, he understood their strategy. Admiral Krex Vorthak studied the readings from his flagship. The humans were pathetic. Their few weapons were ancient and weak. Their ships were slow and clumsy. This would be the easiest conquest in Vorth history. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we are detecting unusual energy patterns from the planet. The electromagnetic field is behaving strangely." Krex dismissed the report with a wave of his hand. "Primitive planetary defenses. Perhaps they are trying to jam our communications. It will not help them." But down on Earth, something was awakening that the Vorth had never encountered before. In meditation centers and churches, in schools and hospitals, in homes and offices, humans were connecting with each other in ways they had never imagined possible. Dr. Lisa Harper watched her instruments as the impossible became real. The consciousness network she had spent decades studying was evolving beyond her wildest theories. What had once been gentle connections between small groups was becoming a planetary mind that included every human being. As the alien deadline approached, 12 billion humans shared their fears, their hopes, and their determination to survive. Individual thoughts began to merge into something greater. Earth's people were becoming something new, something that the peaceful decades had prepared them for without their knowing. The Vorth Collective had conquered 43 star systems by attacking divided, frightened species. They had never faced a world where every inhabitant thought and acted as one. They had no idea that by threatening Earth's peace, they had awakened a force that would change the galaxy forever. On his flagship, Admiral Krex gave the order to begin the attack. The Vorth fleet moved toward Earth's orbital defenses, expecting quick victory over a weak and divided enemy. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. The first Vorth attack came exactly at the 48-hour deadline. Admiral Krex sent 50 ships toward Earth's orbital stations, expecting to destroy them in minutes. The human defenses looked pitiful compared to Vorth plasma cannons and energy shields. Captain Jake Morrison watched the enemy ships approach Aegis Prime. He should have been terrified, but instead he felt strangely calm. In his mind, he could sense all 11 other station captains as clearly as if they were standing next to him. He knew Captain Mary Santos was ready at Aegis 7. He felt Captain Nick Hayes preparing his weapons at Aegis 2. All 12 stations moved as one mind. Enemy ships in range, Ben Torres reported. But Jake already knew. He could feel the distance closing through senses he did not understand. Fire, Jake said quietly. The railguns on all 12 stations fired at the same instant. The Vorth had expected random, panicked shots from frightened humans. Instead, they faced perfectly coordinated attacks that hit their ships at precisely the right angles. The ancient human weapons, designed for destroying asteroids, struck Vorth hulls with devastating accuracy. 3 alien ships exploded immediately. The others scattered in confusion, their shields damaged by impacts they had not expected. Admiral Kreck stared at his tactical display, unable to believe what he was seeing. How did they coordinate that attack? He demanded. Their communication systems are too slow for that kind of timing. His officers had no answer. The human stations were spread around Earth's orbit, too far apart for instant communication, yet they had fired as if controlled by a single mind. On Earth, Dr. Lisa Harper watched her instruments with wonder and growing excitement. The consciousness network was no longer just connecting human minds, it was transforming them. Brainwave patterns from around the planet showed synchronization beyond anything in her research. "Carl, look at this," she called to her assistant. "The network is not just linking people anymore. It is making them into something new." Dr. Carl Stevens studied the data and shook his head in amazement. "The neural activity levels should be impossible. Human brains are not designed to handle this much information flow." But they were handling it. All over Earth, people reported feeling connected to everyone else on the planet. A farmer in Brazil knew what a teacher in Japan was thinking. A child in Canada could sense the emotions of an elder in Africa. 12 billion minds were becoming one vast consciousness. President Elena Martinez felt it too, as she coordinated Earth's defense from the command center. When she needed to make a decision, she somehow knew what every human on Earth wanted her to do. The panic she had felt 3 days ago was gone, replaced by calm certainty. "General Kane," she said, "prepare every ship we have. But do not worry about battle plans. Our pilots will know what to do." The general looked confused, but he followed orders. Within hours, every human vessel in space was moving toward the Vorth fleet. Research ships, cargo haulers, passenger transports, even maintenance pods joined the defense of Earth. None of them were built for fighting, but their pilots moved with impossible coordination. Lieutenant Commander Sam Chen flew her converted, mining ship toward a group of Vorth destroyers. The ship had been designed to break apart asteroids, not fight aliens. Its hull was thin, its weapons were tools, and it had no armor. By all logic, she should have been killed instantly. But Sam was no longer fighting alone. Through the growing consciousness network, she could feel the presence of every other human pilot around her. She knew exactly where they were and what they planned to do. More importantly, she could sense something protective surrounding her. Ship, like an invisible shield generated by the combined will of billions of human minds. The Vorth plasma cannons fired at her ship. The energy beams should have cut through her hull like paper. Instead, they struck something that was not quite there, dissipating harmlessly around her vessel. Sam's mining lasers, powered by the collective human consciousness, burned through, Vorth armor as if it were made of ice. Admiral Krex watched his fleet take impossible losses. Human ships that should have been destroyed were somehow surviving direct hits from his most powerful weapons. Worse, the humans were fighting with tactical intelligence that surpassed his own computers. "They are reading our battle plans," his tactical officer reported. "Every time we change strategy, they adapt instantly." "That is impossible," Krex snarled. "No species can think that fast." But the humans were not thinking fast. They were thinking together. Through the consciousness network, every human defender had access to the combined intelligence of their entire species. 12 billion minds working as one could process information and make decisions faster than any computer the Vorth had ever built. Colonel Alex Rivera led the defense from Luna Base, but he was no longer just one person commanding 20 soldiers. He was part of something magnificent and terrifying. Through his connection to the network, he could see through the eyes of every human in space. He could feel their courage, their determination and their growing anger at the aliens who had dared to threaten their peaceful world. "The Vorth do not understand what they have done," he said to Sergeant Amy Chen. "They think they are fighting individual humans. They have no idea they are fighting all of humanity at once." Dr. Lisa Harper realized the same thing as she studied the consciousness readings from around the solar system. The network had grown beyond Earth. Human defenders throughout space were now connected to the planetary mind. Distance meant nothing when 12 billion souls shared the same purpose. But something else was happening that amazed her even more. The network was not just connecting human minds. It was unlocking abilities that had been sleeping in human DNA for thousands of years. People were moving objects with their thoughts, healing injuries instantly, and even seeming to exist in multiple places at once. "Carl," she whispered, "I think this is what we were meant to become. The peaceful years did not make us weak. They prepared us for this." The battle raged around Earth for hours, but it was not really a battle anymore. The Vorth fleet, designed to crush divided and frightened species, found itself facing something it had never encountered before. Every human defender was backed by the collective will and intelligence of their entire species. Admiral Krex finally understood what he was fighting when his flagship's sensors detected the truth. The electromagnetic field around Earth was not just unusual energy patterns. It was the signature of a unified planetary consciousness that included every human being in the solar system. "Retreat," he ordered his fleet. Full retreat to the outer system. But as his ships tried to flee, Krex realized something that filled him with terror. The human consciousness was still growing. Through quantum connections he did not understand, it was reaching out beyond Earth's solar system. The humans were not just defending their world. They were learning about his empire, his other conquests, and the dozens of species the Vorth had enslaved. The sleeping giant of Earth had awakened, and it was angry about more than just the threat to its own peace. It had discovered that peace existed nowhere else in the galaxy, and it intended to do something about that. Admiral Krex sent desperate messages back to the Vorth homeworlds, warning them that they had made a terrible mistake. But he feared his warnings would come too late. The humans were no longer just defending Earth, they were preparing to liberate the galaxy. Admiral Krex watched his fleet retreat to the edge of the solar system, his confidence shattered. In 300 years of conquest, the Vorth had never faced anything like this. The humans had turned what should have been a simple invasion into a nightmare. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving distress signals from our colonies in the Proxima system." Krex felt ice form in his stomach. "That is impossible. Proxima is 20 light years away. The humans have no faster than light travel." But the reports kept coming. Human ships were appearing throughout Vorth space, attacking military installations and freeing enslaved populations. The attacks were happening simultaneously across dozens of star systems, as if the humans could be everywhere at once. What Krex did not understand was that the human consciousness network operated outside normal space and time. When 12 billion minds joined together, they created connections that stretched across the galaxy instantly. Distance meant nothing to a species that thought as one. On Earth, Dr. Lisa Harper studied readings that made her question everything she knew about physics. The consciousness network was no longer limited to Earth's solar system. Human awareness was spreading across the galaxy through quantum links that should not exist. "Carl, look at these readings," she said, pointing to her screens. "We have human consciousness signatures in star systems we have never even heard of." Dr. Carl Stevens shook his head in wonder. "How is this possible? Our fastest ships would take centuries to reach those places." "I think we are not traveling there in ships," Lisa replied. "I think we are projecting our consciousness across space. The network has made us into something beyond physical beings." She was right. Throughout the galaxy, humans were appearing in places their bodies had never been. They existed as projections of the collective consciousness, able to think, act, and even affect physical reality through the power of 12 billion unified minds. Lieutenant Commander Sam Chen found herself standing on a planet in the Vorth Empire, though her body was still in her ship near Earth. The world around her was beautiful but scarred by strip mining and industrial pollution. Millions of enslaved aliens worked in massive factories under the harsh supervision of Vorth overseers. Sam could feel the suffering of the enslaved beings, as if it were her own pain. Through the human consciousness network, she experienced their hopelessness, their fear, and their desperate wish for freedom. The collective human mind reacted to this injustice with growing anger. "You are not alone anymore," Sam spoke to the enslaved creatures, her voice carrying the authority of all humanity behind it. "We have come to set you free." The Vorth guards opened fire on her with plasma weapons, but the energy beams passed through her projected form harmlessly. Sam was not physically present on the planet, but the power of human consciousness made her real enough to act. She reached out with her mind, and the slave collars around the alien's neck simply dissolved. All across the Vorth Empire, similar scenes played out as human consciousness projections appeared on enslaved worlds. Captain Jake Morrison found himself freeing a species of peaceful farmers who had been forced to grow food for Vorth armies. Colonel Alex Rivera liberated a world of artists whose culture had been destroyed by Vorth occupation. President Elena Martinez, still in Earth's command center, could see and feel everything happening across the galaxy. The human consciousness network had made her aware of hundreds of enslaved species, billions of suffering beings who had never known freedom. The collective human decision was unanimous and immediate. They all had to be saved. "General Kane," she said, "prepare our ships for long-range deployment. We are going to need a physical presence in Vorth space." "But Madam President," Kane replied, "our ships cannot travel that far. We do not have faster-than-light engines." Elena smiled, feeling the confidence of 12 billion minds behind her words. "We will find a way. The consciousness network is showing us possibilities we never imagined." She was right. Human engineers across Earth were suddenly understanding technologies that had seemed impossible just days before. The collective consciousness was unlocking knowledge that had been hidden in human DNA, waiting for the moment when humanity was ready to become something greater. Dr. Lisa Harper watched in amazement as her instruments detected new forms of energy surrounding Earth's ships. The vessels were beginning to move in ways that violated every law of physics she knew. Ships designed for travel within the solar system were somehow preparing for journeys across the galaxy. "The consciousness network is not just connecting our minds," she told Carl. "It is teaching us how to transcend the physical limitations we thought were absolute. We are becoming a species that exists in multiple dimensions at once." Admiral Krex received increasingly desperate reports from across his empire. Human projections were appearing on every Vorth world, freeing slaves and inspiring rebellion. Worse, the liberated species were developing their own consciousness networks, connecting with each other and with humanity in ways that made conquest impossible. "How do we fight an enemy that can be everywhere at once?" he asked his officers. None of them had an answer. The Vorth military was designed to crush physical resistance with superior firepower. They had no weapons that could affect beings made of pure consciousness, no strategies for fighting an enemy that existed beyond normal space and time. On one Vorth colony, Captain Mary Santos appeared before a group of enslaved beings who looked like living crystals. Their natural ability to store and transmit information had made them valuable to the Vorth as living computers. But when Sam touched their crystalline forms with her projected consciousness, something wonderful happened. Two crystal beings' natural abilities merged with the human consciousness network, creating new forms of galactic communication. Information could now flow instantly between any 2 points in the galaxy. The network that had started with 12 billion human minds was growing to include every free species it touched. Colonel Alex Rivera found himself on a world where bird-like creatures had been forced to build Vorth warships. When the human consciousness freed them, their natural ability to sense magnetic fields added new dimensions to the network. Suddenly, humans could navigate through space as easily as the bird. Creatures flew through their planet's sky. Each liberated species brought new abilities to the growing galactic consciousness. What had begun as humanity's response to invasion was becoming something far greater, the birth of a unified galactic mind that included every free being in the galaxy. Admiral Krex realized with growing horror that his empire was not just losing territory. It was losing the very foundation of its power, the isolation and fear that made conquest possible. Species that had been enemies for centuries were now working together as parts of a single vast consciousness. Send a message to the Collective Council, he ordered. Tell them we need every ship in the Empire. We are not fighting one species anymore. We are fighting the entire galaxy. But even as he spoke, Krex knew it might already be too late. The human consciousness network was spreading faster than his ships could travel. Every world it touched became part of something greater, something that made the old ways of conquest and domination impossible. On Earth, 12 billion humans felt the joy of liberation spreading across the galaxy. What had started as a defense of their peaceful world had become the greatest act of liberation in galactic history. They were not just saving themselves. They were freeing the entire galaxy from centuries of oppression and fear. 6 months after the first fourth ship appeared near Earth, the galaxy had changed completely. What had begun as an invasion of one peaceful planet had become the liberation of thousands of worlds. The Vorth Empire, which had ruled through fear for centuries, crumbled as species after species joined the growing galactic consciousness. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of Earth's newest space station, watching ships from dozens of different worlds arrive in the solar system. Crystal beings from the Andara system sparkled like living jewels as they floated in zero gravity. Bird-like creatures from Kepler 442 soared between the ships with graceful ease. Former slaves from across the galaxy came to see the world that had set them free. It is hard to believe this all started just 6 months ago, said Dr. Lisa Harper, joining Jake at the viewing window. Back then, we thought we were alone in the universe. Now we are part of something that includes billions of conscious beings across the galaxy. Jake nodded, feeling the presence of countless minds connected to his through the consciousness network. The sensation had become as natural as breathing. He could sense the joy of a crystal being discovering art for the first time, the wonder of a bird creature exploring a new star system, the gratitude of farmers finally working their own land instead of feeding their oppressors. The network has grown beyond anything I ever imagined, Lisa continued. Each species that joins brings new abilities, new ways of thinking, new possibilities. We are becoming something that has never existed before, a truly galactic civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest. On the Vorth homeworld of Kraxus Prime, Admiral Krex sat in chains before a tribunal of liberated species. The great hall that had once echoed with the commands of Vorth overlords now housed representatives from every world the Empire had conquered. But this was not a court of revenge. The galactic consciousness did not believe in punishment for its own sake. Krex Vorthak, spoke Elena Martinez, now serving as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council. You stand accused of ordering the enslavement of 43 star systems and the deaths of billions of innocent beings. How do you answer these charges? Krex looked around the hall at faces that represented dozens of species. A year ago, these beings had cowered before Vorth power. Now they sat in judgment with calm dignity. The Admiral felt something he had never experienced before: shame. I followed the way of the collective, he said quietly. For 300 years, we believed that only the strong deserved to survive. We thought conquest was the natural order of the galaxy. And now? Asked Dr. Carl Stevens, who had come to represent Earth's scientific community. Krex was silent for a long moment. Through the consciousness network, he could feel the emotions of every being in the hall. Their anger at Vorth crimes was real, but it was balanced by something stronger, a desire to heal the galaxy's wounds and prevent such suffering from ever happening again. Now I see that we were wrong, Krex admitted. The consciousness network has shown me what we destroyed. The art, the music, the stories, the families we tore apart. I feel the pain we caused as if it were my own. This was the most remarkable change brought by the galactic consciousness. Even former enemies like Krex could be connected to the network, forced to experience the consequences of their actions through the eyes and hearts of their victims. It was a punishment more effective than any prison, and a path to redemption that no traditional justice system could provide. Lieutenant Commander Sam Chen flew her ship through the ruins of a former Vorth military base on the edge of the galaxy. The base had been abandoned when its garrison joined the galactic consciousness, rather than continue fighting a war they now understood was wrong. Sam's mission was to help convert the facility into a research station where former enemies could work together. As she worked, Sam marveled at how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been a simple mining ship pilot, spending her days breaking apart asteroids. Now she was part of a galactic civilization that spanned thousands of worlds and included billions of conscious beings. The consciousness network had not taken away her individuality, but it had shown her that she was part of something infinitely larger than herself. Colonel Alex Rivera commanded the new Galactic Defense Force from Luna Base, but his soldiers were unlike any army in history. They carried no weapons designed to kill, only tools for healing and building. Their mission was not to conquer or destroy, but to protect and nurture the growing galactic consciousness. "Colonel," reported Sergeant Amy Chen, "we have received a distress signal from the Outer Rim. A primitive species on Kepler 186F is facing extinction from a natural disaster." Alex smiled. "Prepare the rescue fleet and contact the crystal beings. Their ability to manipulate matter will be essential for planetary engineering." This was how the galactic consciousness responded to every crisis, not with the resources of a single species, but with the combined abilities of all member civilizations. Problems that would have been impossible for humans alone became simple when addressed by a unified galactic mind. Dr. Lisa Harper published her final research paper on human consciousness evolution from her laboratory on New Geneva Station. The paper would be transmitted instantly to every world in the galactic network, translated into thousands of languages and thought patterns that different species could understand. "The transformation of human consciousness during Earth's crisis appears to have unlocked latent abilities present in all intelligent life," she wrote. "When faced with an existential threat, species that achieve true unity can transcend individual limitations and access capabilities that exist at the quantum level of reality." Her research had shown that the Vorth Empire's greatest weakness was also the source of its power. By keeping species isolated and afraid, they had prevented the natural evolution of consciousness that occurred when intelligent beings worked together in harmony. The Empire had created the very conditions that made its own destruction inevitable. President Elena Martinez stood before the Galactic Council in the Great Hall on New Geneva Station. Representatives from over 200 species gathered to address the future of their unprecedented civilization. 6 months ago, Earth was a single peaceful world that wanted nothing more than to tend its gardens and study the stars, she said. "Today we are part of something magnificent, a galactic consciousness that has ended centuries of war and oppression. But our work is not finished." She gestured to the star maps that surrounded the hall, showing the vast regions of space that remained unexplored. Beyond our galaxy lie billions of other worlds, other species that may be suffering under their own versions of the Vorth Empire. The consciousness that began on Earth and spread through this galaxy is just the beginning. We have a responsibility to carry this gift of unity to every conscious being in the universe. The assembled representatives agreed unanimously. The galactic consciousness would continue to grow, seeking out isolated species and offering them the chance to join something greater than themselves, not through conquest or force, but through the simple demonstration that cooperation was more powerful than competition, that unity was stronger than division. Admiral Krex, now serving his sentence by helping to rebuild the worlds his empire had damaged, watched the proceedings with wonder. The species he had once tried to destroy were now offering to share their gift of consciousness with beings they had never met, simply because it was the right thing to do. On Earth, 12 billion humans felt the joy and purpose that flowed through the galactic network. Their peaceful world had become the heart of a civilization that spanned the stars. They had learned that their greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons, but their ability to see other beings as part of themselves. The force that Earth had awakened when its peace was disturbed was not destruction or revenge, but the infinite power of consciousness united in common purpose. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would the universe beyond it. The age of conquest was ending, and the age of unity had begun. Captain Jake Morrison returned to his post on Aegis Prime, but the station's mission had changed completely. Instead of watching for threats to Earth, he now helped coordinate the arrival of new species seeking to join the galactic consciousness. Every day brought new wonders, new friends, and new possibilities for what conscious beings could achieve when they worked together. As he watched the stars, Jake smiled. Somewhere out there, other worlds were making their first tentative steps toward consciousness evolution. The network that began with Earth's awakening would continue to grow, carrying the gift of unity to every corner of the universe. Humanity had disturbed the galaxy's peace, but only to replace it with something far better. The peace that came from understanding that all conscious beings were part of the same magnificent whole.